Something I've noticed about moving between big cities is that every city has its own social personality. And after living in Chicago, moving to New York, and spending a lot of time in Los Angeles, I realized those personalities don't just shape the vibe of the city itself. They slowly shape the people living there too. The way people communicate, the way they make friends, what they prioritize, how emotionally available they are, even the way loneliness feels. Because loneliness in New York feels very different from loneliness in Los Angeles. And friendship in Chicago feels very different from friendship in New York. Some cities make relationships feel grounded and consistent. Others feel exciting but emotionally transient. And others feel warm socially but make it difficult to connect on a deeper level. And I think over time, people unconsciously adapt to whatever social environment surrounds them. So today, I want to talk about the social personalities of Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. I want to start by describing what each city would feel like socially if they were a girl you met at a party. Like, what my first impression of each city would be. Because honestly, that's the easiest way for me to explain the vibe. Chicago feels safe and approachable. Chicago is the girl at the party wearing comfortable clothes and genuinely trying to make sure everyone feels included. She notices you standing awkwardly by yourself, asks if you want a drink, walks you over to the kitchen, pours it for you herself, and starts introducing you to people so that you don't feel alone. New York City feels intense. NYC is the girl wearing something slightly edgy and confusing that somehow only works because she has the confidence to pull it off. At first, she seems intimidating and emotionally unavailable. She doesn't really smile at you when you walk in. But then later, in the bathroom, when you realize you unexpectedly got your period, she silently pulls a tampon out of her purse and hands it to you, like, yeah, girl, I got you. And somehow that moment feels very sincere. Los Angeles feels curated and aesthetically polished. LA is the girl with styled hair, glowing skin, subtle, expensive jewelry, and a signature scent that makes you wonder what perfume she's wearing. She's the first person to warmly greet you when you arrive. She tells you how beautiful you look, points you towards the drinks table, but then immediately floats away because there are 15 other conversations she's trying to maintain across the party. And although all three of these girls would probably be fun to talk to at a party, the actual friendship experience would feel completely different. Because different people fulfill different emotional needs within us. You might have one friend you go to for deep conversations and emotional support, and another friend you call when you want a spontaneous adventure or a chaotic night out. And different friendships also bring out different sides of our personality. Some people make you feel calmer and more grounded. Others bring out a creative side. And maybe others push you to become more ambitious, social, adventurous, or confident. And honestly, I think that cities work in a very similar way. So, how do people actually make friends in Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles? And what do these friendships ultimately end up looking like? I honestly think a lot of it comes down to the infrastructure and lifestyle of the city itself. And obviously, this is all based on my own experiences and observations. But to me, Chicago feels socially accessible. People are much more willing to quickly fold you into their existing friend groups. Like if you meet someone at a bar or while playing volleyball by Lake Michigan in the summer, It's very normal for them to be like, oh, we're all going to another spot after this. Come with us. And I think part of that comes from the fact that Chicago physically has more space and less social pressure built into the city. The apartments are bigger, the bars are less exclusive, the nightlife feels less curated and competitive. Most people genuinely just seem like they're trying to have a good time. In all my years of going out in Chicago, I was never asked if I knew someone who could put me on the list. And there also isn't the same pressure to constantly look hyper glamorous. Honestly, it's so cold for most of the year that half the time people are just bundled up trying to survive winter and enjoy themselves. And socially, that creates a more relaxed atmosphere. You usually don't need a reservation 3 weeks in advance just to exist socially. And because Chicago is significantly more affordable than New York or Los Angeles, especially in the more desirable neighborhoods, I think people overall tend to have a healthier work life balance too, which leaves people with more emotional bandwidth for friendship, spontaneity, and community. And transportation wise, Chicago almost feels like a middle ground between New York and Los Angeles. You can absolutely rely on the L or the Metro to get around, but it's also relatively easy to own a car and find parking. So when I lived there, my lifestyle became this blend of both. I would use my car for the daytime errands like groceries and going to the gym, but then take the train to work or to meet up with my friends at night. And I honestly think that combination contributes to why Chicago feels both spacious and socially connected at the same time, whereas New York friendships feel much more proximity based. Like, if you keep seeing the same person over and over again at work, in a Pilates class, through mutual friends, maybe at the same coffee shop, you slowly warm up to each other over time. And I've noticed that New Yorkers are genuinely slower to open up emotionally, which honestly makes sense because the city itself is so transient. People are constantly moving in and out, and a lot of people openly talk about New York as a temporary chapter of their life. I often hear things like, I'm here for a few years, or I want the New York experience, or I'll probably settle down somewhere else eventually. And on top of that, everyone in New York feels busy. Everyone's optimizing their schedule, everyone's running somewhere, everyone is slightly overwhelmed and crunched for time. So, socially, people tend to guard their energy more carefully until they feel confident that someone is actually going to stick around and reciprocate the friendship. But another thing that really shapes friendship in New York is the physical structure of the city itself. Because New York is built for people, not cars. It's incredibly dense, most apartments are tiny, and very few people are hanging out in giant suburban homes. So friendship mostly happens outside of the home. You walk together, grab drinks, maybe you got bagels in the park. You might run errands together or try a new restaurant. And honestly, I think constantly experiencing the city alongside other people creates a very specific kind of emotional intimacy over time because you end up building memories through movement, spontaneity, and shared experiences instead of just sitting inside someone's house. LA friendships often feel much more aspirational and lifestyle based. I think part of that is because a lot of people move to Los Angeles specifically to pursue industries tied to image and self presentation, like entertainment, fashion, wellness, social media, and maybe being an influencer. So, networking and friendship tend to sometimes blur together in a way that feels very specific to LA. And unlike New York or Chicago, the weather in LA is warm and pleasant most of the year, which completely changes how people socialize. A lot of friendships revolve around outdoor activities like pool days, tennis, Pilates, hiking, maybe dinners outside, and coffee walks. And because people physically have more space in LA, social life also happens inside the home much more often. There are house parties and movie nights and backyard hangouts and lounging around together for hours at someone's house, which creates a very different rhythm socially, especially when you compare that to New York. LA is also such a car-based city that friendships often feel integrated into people's daily routines. Like, the vibe is sometimes your friend picks you up, you go to a workout class together, you run an errand here and there, and then you grab smoothies at Backyard Bowls or Erewhon. Maybe you even sit in traffic together for 40 minutes talking about life. And honestly, I think that's part of why LA friendships can feel simultaneously intimate and slightly performative at the same time. Because the city itself revolves so heavily around aesthetics, lifestyle curation, wellness, and social image. Even the nightlife reflects that. The clubs are extremely selective, reservations do matter, and a lot of social access depends on what you look like and who you know. I think LA friendships often revolve more around shared lifestyles, routines, aesthetics, and aspirations more than pure proximity alone. Perhaps another component to consider is what each city fundamentally encourages people to prioritize. Because the way people work, spend their time, chase status, and structure their lives eventually spills over into their social relationships too. And after spending time in all three cities, I realized that Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles each have very different relationships with ambition. I think out of all three cities, New York is the place where work most easily becomes identity, because New York heavily rewards ambition, productivity, status, and climbing the corporate ladder. There's this constant underlying pressure to optimize yourself and accomplish more. And honestly, I think that's part of what people mean when they say, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. Because the city is incredibly competitive and intense. People are constantly building companies, networking, interviewing, side hustling, creating, pitching, moving upwards. And over time, I think that level of ambition inevitably affects friendships too. People become much more selective with their time and energy because time itself feels scarce in New York. Whereas Los Angeles feels driven in a very different way. People in LA are also ambitious, but it often feels more tied to lifestyle, aesthetics, social access, wellness, and image. And honestly, I think the environment itself contributes to that. The weather is beautiful, the lighting is beautiful, the coastal nature is beautiful. There's something about being surrounded by palm trees, mountains, ocean views, sunsets, and perfect weather year round that naturally makes people more visually conscious and lifestyle oriented. And because so much of LA culture revolves around image and self curation, I think people often gravitate towards friend groups that reflect similar aesthetics, lifestyles, and personal brands. Like, you'll notice entire groups of friends who all somehow look like they belong in the same visual universe. And then there's Chicago. And honestly, out of all three cities, Chicago feels like the place least obsessed with constantly optimizing itself. It feels like there is a much clearer separation between work and personal life there. People still care about career growth and success, of course, but it doesn't feel like ambition completely consumes the social atmosphere in the same way that it can in New York or Los Angeles. And because of that, I think people in Chicago generally have much more emotional energy available for relationships, community, and consistency. Socially, it feels like people are looking less for status and more for good energy. Like, above all else, people just want to be around others who are fun, genuine, reliable, and enjoyable to spend time with. And honestly, I think that's part of why Chicago friendships often feel so grounded and easy. And in a time where adult friendship already feels increasingly difficult to build and maintain, I think it's important to talk about how loneliness can feel different depending on the city that you live in. Because moving somewhere new can feel incredibly isolating. And honestly, even if you've lived somewhere for years, loneliness still has a way of quietly resurfacing, especially in adulthood, because adult loneliness doesn't always look like physically being alone. Sometimes it looks like constantly being surrounded by people, but not feeling deeply known by anyone. Sometimes it looks like having plans every weekend, but nobody that you would actually call during a crisis. And sometimes it looks like spending years building a career only to suddenly realize you accidentally neglected building a real community along the way. And I think different cities create very different emotional experiences of loneliness. New York loneliness, to me, feels fast and overstimulating. The city is packed with millions of ambitious, interesting, diverse people. So when you struggle socially there, it's easy to internalize it and think, like, wait, if I can't find my people here where there are endless options, maybe something is wrong with me. But honestly, I don't think that's true at all. I think New York creates an environment where people become emotionally overwhelmed, hyper busy, and extremely selective with their energy. And because there are always more people, more events, more opportunities, and more social options, I think people sometimes discard potential friendships very quickly the second things feel inconvenient, awkward, or imperfect. Like, on to the next one. And I think that's part of why loneliness can hit so hard in New York. Because you're constantly surrounded by people, yet still feel like none of them are truly your people. On the other hand, LA loneliness can feel socially warm but emotionally distant. In my experience, people in Los Angeles are generally very friendly, polished, and socially open on the surface. And honestly, I've genuinely enjoyed being part of girl groups there. But I also sometimes feel like a lot of interactions stay at the level of lifestyle, aesthetics, routines, and fun social activities rather than emotional depth. I mean, there's always like something to do, like a dinner to go to, workout classes, beach days, house parties, coffee runs, wellness events. And socially, people are often very bubbly and they're very welcoming. But at the same time, I think many people conserve their deeper emotional energy for their long established inner circles, which can leave newer friendships stuck in this cycle of pleasant but surface level interaction. And physically, LA can also feel surprisingly isolating. Because unlike New York, where people are constantly colliding into each other socially, Los Angeles is so spread out and car dependent that seeing people often requires a lot more intentional planning. Friends might live 45 minutes away in completely different neighborhoods. And because social life revolves more around homes and private gatherings, you usually have to actually be invited into people's spaces. So when you're new to LA, loneliness can sometimes feel less like being surrounded by strangers and more like feeling physically outside of everyone else's already established circles. And Chicago loneliness, to me, feels much more tied to life transitions. People settling down, moving to the suburbs, getting married, having kids, and building routines around family life. Because overall, Chicago has a slower, more grounded pace compared to New York or Los Angeles. And since it's more affordable and geographically sprawling, a lot of people actually stay within the greater Chicagoland area as they move through different stages of adulthood, which means friendships often evolve alongside major life changes. I've had a lot of friendships in Chicago that kind of naturally fizzled out over time, not because of conflict or emotional distance, but simply because we slowly entered different lifestyles and routines. And I think that's very different from New York and Los Angeles, where many people in their 20s and 30s still heavily prioritize social life, going out at night, networking, events, self expression, and being out in the world regardless of their relationship status. Whereas in Chicago, I think people often settle more comfortably into these quieter chapters of adulthood earlier. And because of that, loneliness in Chicago can sometimes feel less like social rejection and more like you're competing with people's routines, long term relationships, family obligations, and domestic lives. And you usually lose that competition. But if we think about loneliness on a broader note, regardless of the city, one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is how modern adulthood increasingly pushes people towards hyper independence. And while independence is obviously important, I also think modern culture sometimes overcorrects to the point where needing other people almost gets framed as a weakness. Like, we glorify being self sufficient to such an extreme that people almost seem embarrassed to admit that they want deeper connection, consistency, support, and community. But humans are deeply social creatures. And honestly, I think a lot of modern loneliness comes from the fact that we've built lifestyles that are increasingly individualized while still psychologically needing closeness, belonging, and stable relationships. At the end of the day, having endless acquaintances, networking opportunities, followers, plans, or casual social interactions is not the same as feeling emotionally safe with people. And that's why adult friendship has become so emotionally significant. Real friendship now almost feels like a form of emotional stability in a culture that constantly pushes people towards optimization, reinvention, and moving on to the next big thing. So, after thinking through how each city is structured, how friendships form within them, and how loneliness feels different in each environment, I guess the question becomes, which city is actually right for you? And of course, there isn't a universal answer here because I really do think different cities pull different personalities out of people. Some environments make you more ambitious or more social, some make you more image conscious, some make you slow down, some make you feel creatively inspired, and perhaps some make you feel emotionally grounded. And sometimes the city that feels right for you at 23 won't feel right anymore at 33 because people change. The environments they emotionally connect with often change too. And honestly, I think that's part of why moving cities can feel so transformative sometimes. It's not just that your surroundings change, you change too. So I'm really curious if any of you have experienced something similar living in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, or honestly, any other major city. Did the city shape your friendships? Did it shape your personality? Did it make you feel more connected or more lonely? Because the older I get, the more I realize that where we live quietly shapes far more of our emotional lives than we probably notice in real time. Thank you for listening. I hope today's episode resonated with you. I think I'd like to also do an episode in the future on dating in New York versus Chicago versus LA. So let me know if there is any interest in that. I'm Dina, and this is Casually Thriving.